This is how you get an armoured vehicle from a farm in England 2,000 miles across Europe to the front line.
Слава Україні!
And to brutal battles raging between Ukraine and Russia. It starts with people like Nick.
I really don't know how I got into being an arms dealer.
Nick Mead has been filling his farm with ex-military vehicles for decades.
I think we're one of the few countries that actually let the general public buy a tank.
His company usually gives people the chance to drive tanks and supply vehicles for film and TV. He has a military vehicle for almost any occasion.
This is our tank hearse, and when it's all full of flowers, honestly, it's a picture. It really is.
But after Putin's full-scale invasion in 2022, Ukrainians looking for military equipment started to get in touch. And before he knew it, he'd become an arms dealer.
Because that's what I am at the moment, and I'm not proud of it. You know, we're all about just fun vehicles.
These armoured personnel carriers aren't being used for fun anymore. They're now desperately needed by forces in Ukraine.
At this moment in time, I would estimate that 80% of our turnover is selling tanks to Ukraine. We've done probably about 115, 120 vehicles. That's a lot. This one here is a Spartan, and this is very, very popular.
Ukraine wants vehicles like the Spartan because they're light, quick, well armoured, and crucially, their soldiers already know how to drive and maintain them, since the British government donated some to the war effort last year. They've been used to move troops during offensives and evacuate the wounded. But with high demand comes soaring prices.
There'll be some people who think we're profiteering out of war, and I guess we are, and that kind of hurts. What I'm trying to do is help Ukraine, and I wish a lot more people would help Ukraine.
Nick says some arms dealers have found ways to exploit Ukraine's desperation to make even more money.
These are Snatch armoured Land Rovers, and these were sold in August, and they've still not been picked up.
Nick expected these vehicles to go to Ukraine immediately, but instead, he says, the buyer has stored them at his farm to sell them for an even bigger profit later.
I could sit on it for 5 months. I know which way the prices are going, and that's up. But it's about getting it out there quickly. They need it now, not in 3 months.
So now, Nick says he'll only sell to trusted buyers like Slav, a Ukrainian who's lived in the UK for over 20 years. He's been sourcing military equipment for friends back home since he bought 2 armoured Land Rovers on the day Russia invaded and drove them to Ukraine himself. Slav's just bought 25 APCs, or armoured personnel carriers, from Nick for the Ukrainian World Congress. The NGO has raised millions of pounds since the start of the war to buy equipment for Ukraine's forces.
It's not the government funds, it's not the government's millions, it's the ordinary people collected all these funds and just try to give the best chance for Ukrainian nation to survive.
The deal is done.
Thank you very much for the excellent service.
The vehicles have been stamped with Slav's logo and they have the paperwork needed to get across Europe.
Slava Ukraini!
Now their 2,000-mile journey to the front line begins. But these APCs are a small part of the exploding market of private arms deals between the UK and Ukraine. More than £30 million worth of military vehicles were shipped from the UK in just 6 months in 2022. Serhiy Pritula runs a charity buying equipment for Ukraine's forces.
Russians have a lot of different APCs and tanks, a lot of them thousands and thousands. So we will need more and more to fight strong.
The former Ukrainian TV star and politician has just bought more than 100 APCs from 5 suppliers in the UK.
We are living in a difficult time and we have real hell on the front line because of total war.
Early on in the war, Ukraine's government struggled to equip its military, with many new recruits relying on donations or buying equipment themselves. As billions of pounds of military aid flooded in from the West, the situation has improved. But volunteer groups and private deals are still a vital resource.
We really need donations.
Some of Serhiy's vehicles are still waiting to be shipped from the UK, but the APCs that Nick sold to Slav have arrived in Ukraine. After crossing the Polish border, they're sent to Kyiv to be made battle-ready by mechanics. and then onto an undisclosed location in Kharkiv near the front line, where officers make final preparations before using them on the battlefield.
Надважлива техніка, оскільки вона дасть можливість нам не тільки виконувати оперативні задачі, які поставлені командуванням на полі бою, а дасть і можливості евакуювати як цивільне населення, так і відповідно військовослужбовців у разі термінової необхідності.
While soldiers are grateful for every APC arriving, they say they need thousands more.
Це все ресурси, які закінчуються, і постійно потрібно поновлювати для наших хлопців, для те, щоб прискорити нашу перемогу.
Both sides are reportedly running low on military vehicles, but Ukraine doesn't have the stockpiles of old Cold War hardware that Russia is bringing back into service. So Ukraine can't waste any opportunity to get more vehicles, and buying them directly from suppliers like Nick Mead means they can be fast-tracked to frontline units, avoiding government bureaucracy. It's taken less than 8 weeks for Nick's APCs to be bought and shipped from a farm in Northamptonshire to facing Russian soldiers on the front line in Bakhmut.
Виражаю вдячність волонтерам з Англії, з України і всім, хто причетний до передачі цього стального малюка до нашого підрозділу.
But within days of the APCs arriving, Slav receives this video from a unit fighting in Bakhmut. An unmanned Spartan, which he says is one he bought from Nick, completely destroyed in a missile attack. Every vehicle lost brings greater demand for dealers like Nick and more pressure on fundraisers like Slav to maintain the unrelenting flow of arms to keep Ukraine in the fight.
Слава Україні! Героям слава! Перемога за нами!